Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name's Mike and this is Build and Tinker, and we're back with some bat action on the 66 Batmobile from Fanhome, the 1/8 scale part work. And today we're covering issues 81 to 86. A few small parts really before we get onto the big bodywork components that are coming soon. And this is mostly going to focus on the front bulkhead in front of the passenger cell and dashboard, and a few finishing touches there, a couple of engine components and small pieces. And then very soon we're going to get into some of those big chunky pieces of bodywork, which I'm really looking forward to as we come towards the end of this car. We've obviously done some mods. We've got the Mike Lane bat circuit in there. We're still waiting for the release of the bat dash and the mobile crime computer. Obviously we'll install those when they come out, so we probably won't screw any major body panels down when they come in, because we're going to want to take them out again. But anyway, let's move on with issues 81 to 86 and let's get going. And with the car on the bench, we now look at the first parts that we're going to get here with issue 81, and it's actually to fill this hole here in the dashboard on Robin's side. There is a gap, and that's where we're going to be installing the detector-scope screen, and it comes in issue 81. And if I just move the Batmobile to one side, you can see the parts, and here they are. And we have the main back plate of the detector scope, as it were. This cowl goes over the front of the display. The display itself, which has got the arrow, a few buttons, and the detector scope. Really hard to see that, but the detector scope sort of sign that goes on the dash, the little label. So careful not to lose that. There's a backing piece here for an LED, and a few other little bits and pieces and some screws. And with the Batmobile out the way and all the parts where we can see them, including some parts from a different model, there we go, we have everything we need to get started. And with all the parts laid out, we're going to start here with this piece here. It's the screen itself with the little arrow on it, and it goes into this bezel. There are two little cutouts in the screen either side, and they line up with the screw posts on the bezel to ensure it's oriented the right way. I don't know if really the right way is whichever way you want, because it just points in any direction. So you can have it pointing, in this case I think we're going to have it down to the left. And then this needs to be mounted onto the main back plate. There's a little flat on the bezel that needs to be towards the bottom. So we're going to drop it into place. It's all falling apart. Drop it into place and secure it with a couple of screws. And the screws we're using are KPs. And that's that piece assembled there. Next we want to install the little LED holder, and there's a little tab that sticks out the side, has a little hole in it, and it just drops onto a post on the left hand side here of the bracket, and then an AP screw holds that in. The next step is to install the different buttons, and the detector scope label just goes into the two little holes here. There's little studs that push in, so you just have to line it up and then give it a firm push. Okay, and that's in place. And then next, the buttons. Now we've got a few different types here. Got these 4 black ones, 2 small silver ones, and then a single silver one on its own. So the black ones are 81F, the pair are 81E, and the single silver one is G. So the black ones at 81F need to go here on the left hand side in the bottom 2 and upper 2 positions. So there's 4 control knobs and 5 holes, so we're not using the center hole, we're going the 2 either side of the center, and we just push fit them into place. Okay, so that's those 4 black control buttons in. There's now a lone silver one to go in the middle of those. just there. And then these two silver ones go on the other, and they're really tiny when they go on the other side. Okay, and that's the assembled detectoscope piece. We need to attach it to the dashboard, but not before installing the LED into the back. And it's the LED with the M sticker on it. Just pushes into a hole in the back of the reflector, and then the cable goes through the dashboard. The whole thing sits into place over the two screw holes. It kind of snaps into place, and then we use some AP screws to hold it down. And there's one here and one on the other side. And that's it for installing new components in this issue, but there is another step, and I'll get these pieces out of the way. I'm going to show you the step, but we're not actually going to do it. And that's because the next step in the magazine is to install the floor and attach the floor to the actual chassis itself. Let me show you that. So it's very simple. It drops into place, and then underneath the car there are 4 screws that hold it in, and it's pretty typical of the way these cars are put together. The reason we're not going to do that right now is simply because we know we've got some more mods to install, and it only means we're going to have to take all of this out anyway. So I would rather leave these screws out, but obviously we need to make sure we keep them safe. So the screws we'll be using for that are the EP screws, so we're going to keep those safe, ready for later. And we'll move on to the next issue, which is issue 82. So we move on to issue 82, and we've got a number of different components for the dash, including some of the chromed front covers that clip on, a few more buttons and brackets for those buttons, and some screws, plus this little piece here, which I don't know what that is yet, but let's find out. And our first step is to take this silver bracket here, and we're going to put some of these little silver push switches, or they might be toggle switches, I think. And we're going to put 4 of those in to 4 of the holes. And it's going to be the 4 holes that are clustered together on my right here. Again, going to go in pretty easy if you keep them straight. And then in this packet we have a little red emergency stop button, and that's going to go in the final hole here on the left, just like so. And then this black square piece needs a little plastic black button pushed into it. It comes in a bag. It's very, very small, and there's no spares. And it gets pushed into the center of this circular molding in the middle here.
Five minutes later.
So that's done, and I'm going to be honest, it was incredibly hard. I wasn't able to use these tweezers to do it. They're too thin. Kept twanging away. So I went to my workshop and used a pair of wide flat tweezers and did it under a microscope because I couldn't see. That's a particularly horrible part to put together. It then has to push fit into the bottom part of this bracket here, into the hole that's closest to the top. It just pushes in like that. And we start with this silver piece here, which has these holes in it, and we're going to attach into that these buttons. They come on a sprue, and they've given us 8 of them. We're going to use 4 of them right now. So we'll take the first 4 off, and they're just going to push into 4 of these holes. It's It's the 4 that actually have some writing above them. You probably can't see it on the camera, but there's writing above and below the first 4 holes on the left here. So we're going to be pushing these buttons into those. Again, we'll use some tweezers because I think that's going to be easier. And actually, they don't go in too bad. They're quite easy as long as you keep them straight and give it a push whilst holding it with the tweezers. They go in quite easily. And then the final hole on the end here has this sort of stop button on it. So there's 2 in this packet, and it's a little red sort of, looks like an emergency stop button. It just goes in that last hole there. So with the dashboard here, we're now going to take this piece we've just assembled, and it drops over the 2 screw holes here in the dash, just like that. And then we're going to screw that into place with a couple of AP screws. And with this piece installed, we now go to our first piece, which simply installs on the opposite side of the steering column, but in the same way, with a couple of AP screws. We've then got 2 more little buttons to install, and they go into these holes here in the center silver piece for the what's labeled Bat Spark and Bat Super Rocket. And there is a label that I put on there in an earlier issue, and it's nice and wonky because I'm not very good at that sort of thing. Those 2 buttons come in a bag. And again, it's a matter of just trying to push them in with a pair of tweezers without dropping them or breaking anything. And they're quite long, so they're easy to drop because they wiggle around as you try and install them. There's the first one in, and the second one, well, the second one was the first one, and it twanged across the floor, so now we've got to try and find it. Okay, with that piece retrieved off the carpet, we'll try and get it in the hole again. And there we are. Wasn't so bad, second attempt. And then we have to take these chrome covers, and they have a little handle on the bottom. Don't know why these have a handle on the top and these are on the bottom for some reason on this piece here, and they simply click into place just like so. And for the next step, we need the car back, and because we're going to actually attach the dashboard to the passenger cell here, and it's screwed in place in 4 locations. And there's some cables here coming out of the dashboard, and I believe they go through the gap in the middle. I'll double check that before we do anything. Yes, they do. So they go through the gap in the middle there. And we need a couple of AP screws. There are 4 screws that will hold this together eventually, but at the moment it's asking us just to do these 2 outer ones here and here. And then the same on the other side. And then there will be 2 here and here on these sort of long tabs. They will, at some point in the future, also screw in place and hold that together. But these cables come through the middle, and you'll see I've got some other cables that are sticking out. That's because I haven't attached the floor pan yet, because I don't want to. Normally you would do it at this stage, but I am waiting to install some more mods, and I'm going to need to be able to get to the circuit board. There we go. The other thing as well is that we are going to be installing a mod for the dash, and as yet I don't quite know where that's going to live. But it's likely to be up underneath somewhere. But it will need cables to come out and go back to the main circuit board back here, and they'll probably be running under the floor with all the others. So coming out the front, running under the floor into the circuit board here. So I don't mind screwing things on that are easy to get off, but at the moment I don't see the point of putting the floor on. And that's it for issue 82. So we'll move on to issue 83. So in issue 83 we're assembling the steering wheel and the rest of the steering column. We've got all these pieces here. That's another part of the steering column. Some screws, obviously the main part of the steering wheel, the steering wheel centre, a few other bits and pieces. The steering wheel centre actually has this sort of transparent cap. There's some other bits and pieces there. This is actually metal, so it's a really nice heavy piece. Quite like that. And the very first thing we're going to do with this is attach a piece to the underside there. These spokes either side actually have some holes in. And we're going to take this piece here, which is, I'm not quite sure what it is actually. Also, the left joystick. Very small black piece with a silver tip. It has a little post sticking out of it. It goes onto the left-hand side of the steering wheel and it just pushes into place. Okay, it just pushes into place here. There are two of these joysticks, the left one and the right one. They're not the same, so make sure you choose the right one. Yeah, and it's got a shaped stud to ensure it goes in the right way. I think it's hard to tell because it's all black, but we do we fit the first one, and then we fit the other one onto the hole in the other side of the steering wheel. Okay, and that's both of those joysticks installed. Next, they want us to take the steering column and then this small sort of cross-shaped piece, which will be used to form a universal joint, like so. We need to screw those together with some SM screws. So I'm just screwing this in, and what I've done is I've wedged the tweezers through the gap, because what was happening was I was trying to tighten this up. It's quite stiff, which is causing the universal joint in the middle to spin around, and it's too small to hold on to. So by wedging this in, it stops it spinning while I tighten it up. Obviously don't over tighten it because it needs to rotate. We're now going to attach the steering column to the steering wheel itself. There is a hole in the end of the column, and the column itself is keyed to ensure that it goes in and doesn't spin round. So we're just going to insert it in the right orientation to the back of the steering wheel, and it'll go in nicely like that. And then we need a BM screw to hold that in. The BM screw goes straight through the centre of the wheel and into the column itself. Should be a nice tight fit. So we're going to start by installing this black plastic piece into the centre of the steering wheel, and there's this silver piece with a bunch of holes in it and like a curved recess in the top half, and this plastic piece here, which has these two little plastic studs, pushes into that. It goes into that top curved recess with the studs facing down. I'll use some tweezers for this because it's quite hard to get my hands in there. Okay, I was finally able to get that piece in. And then the next part is this chromed piece. It has all these different studded sort of buttons sticking out of it. That goes in from the rear, in through the holes in this center piece. And then we put the clear lens over the top. So if you look carefully at the letter, you won't be able to see it on camera, I doubt, but if you look carefully on it, there is some sort of writing etched on it, and it's the numbers for the speedo, which need to be at the top where the black piece is. Obviously, you also need to get it the right way around, otherwise all the numbering is going to be backwards, but I'm really struggling to see which way round that is. Okay, I've been able to get a magnifying glass and have a look at that, and we have the 10 on the left, and it goes all the way up to sort of 130 on the right, and then we just push the clear perspex piece over the front, and there's our instrument panel. I think 130 is probably a little bit optimistic for that car, particularly in Batmobile format. It was apparently quite slow in the on the set of the movie because it didn't have much power. Obviously, once Batman put the afterburner on, it was really quick. And then this whole centerpiece literally just push fits into the middle of the steering wheel. There's 2 pins, so you just got to get the pins lined up, and then it just pushes into place. And that's the steering wheel finished with the center installed. Just a push fit, and you'll have your speedometer at the bottom. And it's not the tightest fit, but I don't think it's going to fall out. But that's the end of that issue, and we'll move on to the next one, which is issue 84. In issue 84, we are moving on to that bulkhead. There's not a great deal to do, though, by the looks of it. We've got the main bulkhead piece, these 2 pieces here, and a length of hose. So we start by building the fuse box, and there's this top piece here, which has like a cross shape, and a circular piece that sticks out, and there's a pin on that. That's going to go into the top of this. So it looks like a hose connector. The pin is keyway to ensure it goes on the right way. So you can't really put it on the wrong way, but that's how it looks when it's finished. And then we have to take our hose and push it onto this hose connector here on. So with the bracket away from me, this hose connector is on my right. It's just a gentle push fit onto that hose stud just there, and that's all they need us to do. They don't want us to assemble this any further, so pretty quick and easy issue 84, and we'll move on to issue 85. Keep the parts from issue 84 handy in case I need them, but in issue 85 we're constructing the battery and the plinth that it stands on, and we start by taking that plinth, which is this piece here, and the main body of the battery, and they need to just come together, and underneath there's a couple of screw posts, and the battery just sits on top. So it needs to go this way around, and what I've done is I've matched the pattern on the top of the battery box with the pattern as it's shown in the magazine. So it's a bit tricky to show you that on camera, but just match what's on the magazine. And we need to screw these together with some TP screws. And with those screws in place, the next thing is to install the battery terminals, and they're supplied outside of a bag. I think they're the same. Yeah, they are. And they just need to push down onto the terminal lugs. There's one at each end, and they're on the outer edge of the bracket. It looks like they're keyed, so you can only put them in one orientation. And that's the orientation they end up in once you've installed them. And then there's some caps. These yellow caps come in a little bag. Each of these is the cap for the individual cells in the battery, and they push into these holes here. They're all identical, and they don't really have any particular orientation because they're just round. I do feel like they could have asked us to do this in a different order, because doing this with the bracket installed is actually not that straightforward, because you're trying not to apply force and break the bracket. It also means you can't put the battery flat down on the bench. So I'm going to take the bracket back off. See, now I can put the battery flat on the bench. I do wonder sometimes who comes up with these instructions. And there's the 6 battery caps installed. They were quite difficult to get in, but they're done. And now we're going to put the bracket back in place. With the bracket reinstalled, we now push the bracket onto the firewall. And it sits, there's 2 screw posts that just go into 2 recesses in the firewall. Then we need 2 more TP screws, sorry. And then the batteries installed on the firewall like that. Next we need to build the starter motor. So there's another large sort of bracket here, and then we have these pieces, a hose and two pieces of the starter motor. And we're going to take the fuse box assembly that we did earlier. That's going to push onto this first hole, which is keywayed with the hose coming out to my left. Okay, and that's just a firm push onto there. We then take the starter motor and we need to attach this hose to the pin on the end of it. And then there's this end cap that goes onto the open end of the starter. And that's just a push fit. And then that pushes onto this whole assembly here with the hose going underneath. It's not a hose, it's a wire, but it goes underneath the fuse box that we just installed. Again, that just pushes together. It's all hard to see, it's all kind of black on black, and feel like that needs some paint because it's looking pretty black and shiny and not how an engine bay looks. However, that now goes onto the firewall on this side, and with all of the starter motor components hanging underneath, and it pushes on. There's 2 holes, and those posts go onto those holes. With that lined up, a couple more TP screws. And then finally, the wire that comes out of the fuse box, as it were, on here, has to connect to the furthest connector on the battery. So we just pop it into this one. If you can see that, it goes into this one on that side. Just like so. So it's going into this one. This one we leave disconnected for now, and that is the end of this issue, and we'll move on to issue 86. So in issue 86 we're going to build the power steering pump. We've got lots of hoses. This looks like some sort of a pump body. There's another piece here. More hoses and a little hose connector of some kind, some sort of junction box. And then we have 2 radiators. Again, I feel they could do with some paint and some weathering to make them look a bit more like radiators. So we start with the main body of the steering pump, and we're going to fit 2 pieces to that. We'll start with this large gold colour, sort of brass coloured piece. Again, everything's keywayed, so you can't put it in the wrong direction. It simply pushes onto the end like so. And then this smaller hose connector, there's a keyway piece on the sort of shallow end, and that goes into the side of this pump. Again, it can only go one way, and there it is. So that now sticks out of the side of the pump. And then we've got to attach some hoses. So we start with what is the shortest hose, and that comes out of this T-piece we've just fitted, and it pushes on here so that it comes out in the direction of the whatever that is, the reservoir. Then we take the 110mm piece, so that must be this shorter one, sorry, this middle sized one, and that comes out of the reservoir on this hose connector that's sort of poking up at a 45-degree angle. So that's that there. Then we need to attach the whole assembly onto this circular, let's get those radiators out of the way, this circular mounting piece just here. Again, there is a little key, it's a little piece that sticks out here that goes into a little slot there to ensure you get it oriented correctly. And then we screw that in from behind using an AP screw. Okay, minor disaster. So in the process of screwing that on, I hadn't realised I put my hand around behind and I snapped this hose off from there. So you probably can't see there's a small piece of hose still inside. Well, sorry, there's a small piece of pin still inside this hose, and it should be attached to that. So I'm going to have to try and repair that one later. Again, it all comes down to, I'm following the order of the instructions, but I think, I don't know, to me it would have made sense to attach the body first to the back, then attach those other pieces, because then you're not having to flip things over all the time or constantly risk breaking them. But it happens, we'll get it sorted. Next to these two radiators, they are identical. There's one either side and they go into this pair of holes. They have these little radiator hose connectors at the top. So just make sure they are uppermost. And they drop over their screw holes, so it's really easy to get them located correctly. And again, screwing in from the rear with some AP screws. We need 4 of those. Again, if it was me, I would say put the radiators on first, because we're now having to roll this whole thing over with this big piece sticking out that could get broken. If we put the radiators on beforehand, it just minimises that risk, doesn't it? Okay, and that's the 2 radiators installed. And now there's this long piece of hose. Now they've conveniently tied it in knots for us, which was very helpful. And we actually have to cut it into 4 pieces. Now I don't have a ruler with me, but I do have a cutting mat, which has a ruler built in. So let's start with the first one. And we need 70 millimeters. And then we need 75, 95 and 100. So it wasn't a lot left, so we must have cut it right, hopefully. Okay, and so I've got them in the order of their size: 70, 75, 95, 100. The 100 goes on the far right here, the 95 on the far left, 75 on the inner left, and our 70 on the inner right. And that is the last step for this issue, which is the last issue of this video. So we had quite a few fiddly pieces to do in this video, but we seem to have got through them mostly unscathed. I do have one hose I now need to try and find a way to glue on. It's going to be a bit tricky because it's very small, there's not much surface area, and if you overdo it with the super glue, you can actually melt some of these plastics. So we'll see. It happens from time to time, but what it shows is that sometimes the instructions don't always give you the best order to do things. So sometimes it's worth having a look at all the steps before you start any of them, and then make a decision as to whether or not it makes sense to do things in a slightly different order. But that's all part of the process and part of the learning experience. So hopefully if I've made a mistake, it means you don't have to. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please remember to click the like and subscribe buttons below, and I look forward to seeing you next time. But before I go, just a quick word about what's been happening with the channel recently. Technically, you've probably noticed I've had a couple of videos where I've had a few technical issues, and that's mostly been because of the fact that I started with some basic equipment I had lying around. I didn't really want to spend any money until I knew that it might be worth it, and actually some of that equipment's a bit old and it just got tired, I think, and a bit overworked, and it started to fail. So I have bought some new equipment. I've got a brand new mixer, I've got a couple of new cameras. It's not all set up properly fully yet. I'm still getting to grips with how to use it all, but hopefully in time what that means is we'll have a better quality of video, better quality of sound, and I'll be looking forward to getting you some more close-ups so you can see a bit more about what I'm doing, rather than these sort of zoomed out shots. So bear with me while I try and get it all sorted. It costs a lot of time, it costs a lot of money. The channel doesn't make any money, so it all comes out of my pocket. So bear with me while I get it sorted, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.